All right, let's talk about something that's literally all around us, shaping everything from ancient armies to the tech company you might work for. It's a force so powerful, yet so common, we barely even notice it. We're going to pull back the curtain on the hidden story of management.
So, let me ask you, when I say the word management, what's the first thing that comes to mind? Is it your boss? Never-ending meetings? Maybe a whole ocean of spreadsheets and deadlines? Yeah, it can all feel kind of boring, right?
But what if I told you the real story is so much bigger than that? We're talking about the rise and fall of empires, the absolute chaos of industrial revolutions, and a really deep dive into the messy, unpredictable, and fascinating nature of people. This isn't just about spreadsheets. This is the epic story of how we organize ourselves to get things done.
So, to really get what management is all about today, we've got to go back in time. And no, I don't mean back to the 80s with big hair and bad ties. I mean way, way back.
Think about it. Before there were any companies, there were just groups of people, communities, tribes. And the very first, most basic problem any group has to solve is simple: survival. How do you organize everyone to protect the group from threats, whether they're from the outside or from within? Well, the answer to that question was the very first version of management.
See, in those early days, management wasn't about quarterly reports. It was about organizing people for security. The Roman legions? They are a fantastic example. Their incredibly detailed structure, their discipline, their supply chains, it was an absolute masterclass in management that allowed a tiny city to build an empire and hold it together for centuries.
Okay, now let's hit the fast-forward button and jump ahead a couple thousand years. We land right in the middle of the smoke, the steel, and the noise of the Industrial Revolution. The entire world was changing at lightning speed, and out of that change came a brand new, massive management problem.
All of a sudden, things weren't being made in little workshops anymore. Nope. We're talking huge, centralized factories with thousands and thousands of workers. Now, how in the world do you coordinate that many people, all under one roof? It was, to put it mildly, total chaos. The old, informal ways of managing folks just completely fell apart.
Well, this one engineer, a guy named Frederick Taylor, he looked at this chaos and had a pretty radical idea. He thought, what if we could actually study the work itself? What if management could stop being just guesswork and intuition and become a real, measurable science, with laws and principles just like chemistry or physics?
And this new way of thinking, which he called scientific management, was built on an idea called Positivism, which is basically the belief that you can tackle social problems the same way you tackle scientific ones. The goal was pretty straightforward: measure absolutely everything, find the single most efficient way to do a task, and then make everyone do it that way to get the most possible output.
And Taylor really believed this. He thought that by scientifically optimizing every little movement, you could create a system so incredibly efficient that it would make everyone better off, from the guy who owned the factory right down to the person on the assembly line. He was on a quest for the one best way to do any job.
But there was a bit of a problem with this idea of a perfect machine. A really, really big one, actually. People. And in this next chapter of our story, the human element comes roaring back into the picture.
As it turns out, you just can't predict what a person is going to do with a simple formula. People aren't cogs. So by the 1960s, a new way of thinking called postmodernism started to push back. It argued that this purely scientific, top-down approach was completely missing the most important piece of the puzzle: us. This was a huge challenge to that idea of a one best way, because it said things like culture, emotions, and what actually motivates an individual, well, they matter a whole lot more than a stopwatch ever could.
And with this big shift came a whole new vocabulary. Suddenly, managers had to talk about things like chaos, the simple fact that you can't really predict social events. And complexity, this idea that a company isn't some neat blueprint, it's a tangled, messy web of relationships, feelings, and power dynamics. You couldn't just measure it anymore, you had to actually try to understand it. And wow, what a dramatic shift in perspective this was. The whole philosophy just flipped on its head. We went from seeing a worker as a simple cog in a machine to seeing them as a complex individual. The main focus moved away from pure efficiency and measurement toward adaptation and interpretation. The goal was no longer about finding the one best way, but about learning how to navigate a world that was endlessly and fascinatingly complex.
Okay, so if the world is this complicated, messy place, how on earth do you even begin to manage it? Well, you can't use a single blueprint anymore, that's for sure. Instead, modern managers came up with a whole new toolkit of ideas to try and make sense of it all.
One of the most critical tools in that kit is something called micro-based thinking. And the idea is actually pretty simple. Instead of trying to solve some huge, overwhelming problem all at once, you break it down into layers, levels of analysis. You start small with just one employee. Then you zoom out to their team. Then you zoom out again to the whole company. And finally, you look at the entire industry.
This layered approach is so powerful because it lets you see how a problem on one level, like, say, one person's performance, can create ripples that move all the way up and affect the success of the entire company. It's all about seeing the connection between the smallest little parts and the biggest possible picture.
Here's another key idea. Modern management is eclectic. Now that's just a fancy word that means it borrows the best ideas from all over the place. It's not some pure science that exists in a bubble. It's more like a toolkit, and it's filled with awesome concepts it's grabbed from psychology, from sociology, from economics, you name it.
Let me give you a perfect example. There's this concept called absorptive capacity. It actually comes from psychology, and it's all about a person's ability to learn new stuff. Well, management science basically borrowed that idea to help explain why some companies are amazing at adopting new technology, while their competitors just get left in the dust. It's this interdisciplinary approach in action.
And to use this amazing toolkit, managers have to be able to look at problems from a bunch of different angles. So sometimes they'll use deduction, starting with a big theory and seeing how it applies to one specific situation. Other times they do the opposite, induction, where they look at a lot of small details and build a bigger theory from them. They look at quantitative data, the hard numbers, to figure out what is happening, and then they'll use qualitative data, like interviews and observations, to understand why it's happening.
So we've come a long, long way, right? From ancient tribes organizing for survival to modern CEOs looking at complex data. What does this whole journey really tell us about the nature of management?
When you look at it this way, the story of management is really a story of problem solving. In the ancient world, the number one problem was security. Then, during the Industrial Revolution, the big problem was efficiency. In the postmodern era, it became human complexity. And today, in our crazy, fast-moving world, the core problem that management has to solve is constant, relentless adaptation.
And honestly, if you take one thing away from all of this, let it be that. Management isn't some dusty, static set of rules in a textbook. It's a living, breathing thing. It's a discipline that is constantly reinventing itself to try and solve the biggest organizational challenges we face as humans.
Which, of course, leaves us with one last really fascinating question to think about. Our world right now is being totally reshaped by artificial intelligence, by remote work, by global teams. The very idea of how we organize ourselves is changing again right before our eyes. So what do you think? What's the next great problem that the next great management theory is going to have to solve?
Subscribe to our YouTube channel to complete the series.